Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Arunachala Ramanaya. Om Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Arunachala Ramanaya. Om. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. Welcome to Satsang. Isn't it wonderful to be here together? To share silence, and maybe even to share some words.
O Sri Ramana, bestow your grace upon me so that I may, in experience, flawlessly attain the unequaled and unsurpassed essence of the practice, sadhana, of self-knowledge, the excellent path. Who am I? Which you have discovered to be the central and foremost among all the various paths. O Sri Ramana, the heart, who through your grace protects me at every moment by guiding me along the correct path. Rise from within and teach me the true import of your divine and unequaled teachings, so that I may know them in their undefiled, pristine purity. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Thank you so much, Luke. What a wonderful reading. What a lovely reading. Thank you so much. Anyone would like to read a teaching? Esther, welcome.
Hi, hi, Tom. Hi, everyone. I have a very short reading. I just found this sentence quite amazing. It's from The Paramount Importance of Self-Attention by Sri Sadhguru, page 102. When, after a long period of effort and struggle to do sadhana, one gives up doing sadhana, then and only then does real sadhana, self-attention, begin.
A beautiful short teaching indeed.
Yeah.
And would you like to repeat it for us, please?
Sure.
Thank you, Hester.
When, after a long period of effort and struggles to do sadhana, one gives up doing sadhana, then and only then does real sadhana, self-attention, begin.
So thank you for the reading. What made you want to read this to us today? Have you heard this teaching before? I'd be interested to know.
Well, it just struck me because I've discovered kind of that trying to do practice with the mind, trying to guide it with the mind, thinking I have to do this or I should do that, it's a dead end because it ends up you just thinking more and more. And eventually, when you give up doing that, it feels like sinking down and and um, and going deeper. And what Sri Sadhguru Om then calls self-attention begins. So I don't know if I'm doing self-attention, but it does feel deeper than thinking during practice.
Thank you. Did you have any questions about it for me at all? Or anything else you wanted to say?
I'm just wondering, is self-attention and turning inwards and asking, who am I? Is it all the same thing?
Self-attention, turning inwards, asking, who am I? Are these the same thing? The first two are the same.
Mm.
Self-attention, turning inwards are the same. Who am I is a prompt to take us to self-attention, turning within. So depending what you mean by who, essentially they're all the same thing.
Mm.
But the question, who am I, is not turning within. The question, who am I, is a prompt
Turn.
to
Yeah.
turn us inwards.
To turn away from the mind by asking to who is the thought occurring. That's at least how it seems to me.
Yeah, there's the question, to whom is the thought occurring?
And then,
And then there's the question, who am I?
who am I? Yeah.
And these questions are prompts
Turn within.
to turn our attention inwards. Yes, towards ourselves. And that is called turning inwards. That is called self-attention. That is called self-inquiry. That is sometimes Bhagavan calls that, less accurately, he calls that thinking of the self, even though it's not thinking. Sometimes he calls it clinging to the self, although it's not clinging in the typical way. It's also called self-abidance. It's also called being the self. It's also called nididhyasana, which means meditation or meditation on the self. It's also called Atma Dhyana, which literally means meditation. Atma means self, and Dhyan means meditation. Meditation or concentration on the self. All these different words referring to the same essential liberating factor. It's the one liberating factor. Being what you are. It's also called being what you are. Summa ira, just be, or be still. It's also called be still, just be. What do you think of that, Hester? Is that your question answered, or do you have anything else?
Yeah, that's the question answered. But it reminded me of another question that I had. And that is, I know that I'll probably find out when I get there. But how do you know this whole feeling of eternal and being yourself before you were born and after you die? I feel how do I know, how do you know that the self is not transient also?
Yeah. This is actually a very wonderful question. And the question is, if I heard it correctly, how do I know? And I'll extrapolate, I'll expand the question if I may. You tell me if I'm going off into different terrain. The question is, how do you know the self is eternal? How do you know it exists before the body? How do you know it persists after death of the body? How do you know it is not transient? Let's expand the question even further. Just because it feels permanent, in my experience, in one's experience, just because the sense of I am seems to be constant in my experience, does that mean it's actually eternal? How to know? Is that the question, Hester? Yes, okay. It's a very good question. First, I'll give you the wrong answer. It's not the wrong answer, but it's the wrong answer. It's like a typical answer that's given. I was searching for the answer to this question on and off for years. Only Bhagavan's teachings answer the question for me. Only teachings I found that answered this question were Bhagavan's teachings, Ramana's teachings, no one else's. Doesn't mean no one else's does answer the question, but I couldn't find it anywhere else. The wrong answer is that, well, whatever's happening, the sense of I am is there. It's continuous in your experience, So if you look into your experience, the only constant thing is the sense I or I am, and therefore it is eternal. And then say, well, just because, and then the questioner might say, well, just because it seems eternal in my experience, then how do I know? And then the teacher can interrupt. So no, 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 no. This is the wrong answer, by the way, remember? No, no, no. Look at your experience. In your experience, the only eternal thing is your sense I am or your consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is eternal. But the question is, but how do I know when the body dies, the consciousness doesn't die with it? And then the teacher will erroneously say, well, the body appears inside the consciousness. The body only appears in consciousness. The consciousness is continuous. The body comes and goes. And so when the body goes, the consciousness will remain. But for someone like me, and maybe someone like you, Hester, and maybe some others of you here, it's like, well, hang on a second. Well, just because it seems continuous in my experience, how do I know that's not an illusion? How do I know that sense I am is not an illusion? How do I know the consciousness being continuous is not an illusion? You talk about all these illusions. Why is that not an illusion? Are people following this logic? So let's answer. So that's the wrong answer. Do you agree with that being a wrong answer, Hester? Have you heard this before?
Well, everything that is constant in my experience is only in my experience. So, my experience is very limited.
Exactly.
How can I know what's outside that experience?
Excuse me. So, how to know the self is eternal? Just because it feels eternal, or it's eternal in my experience of, a few decades of my life or whatever it is, doesn't mean it's eternal. You might think the sun's eternal because the sun's always there every morning. Or you might think a mountain is eternal because the mountain's there all the time. But you'd be wrong. The sun is born and the sun will die. Mountains are born and they will die, or created and destroyed, if you prefer those words, instead of born and die. Same essential idea. Okay. First of all, you do not know intellectually in the mind. It is not the ego that knows the self is eternal. That's the first thing. What it is when you discover the self, the truth that you are. There is no body, there is no mind, there is no world, there is no time, there is no space. But you are there. There is no mind to know, but you are. And that is all there is. That is everything. And that is, in quotes, knowing the self is eternal. It's the only thing there is. It's not eternal in sense. We say before the body was here, the self was there. After death, the body, the self will be there. This is still time bound. Realization is beyond this, really. There is no time, no space in truth. So all there is that. What is that? It's what you are. Define it? I cannot. Cannot be defined in words. It is known through its being, through being its existence is its knowing it itself, let's say. These words are clumsy at best. But it's the being, the isness, the being that is there without a body being there, without a mind being there, without the world being there, You still are. And let's to put it in sort of terms the mind can understand, although it's not like this, to put it in terms like the mind can understand, with devoid of a body, mind, and world, you exist. This is the knowledge. Therefore, you know that what you are is beyond body, mind, and world. Because there's no body, there's no mind, but you're there. Any questions, or does that make sense, Hester?
Yes, that makes sense, and it also ties in with my first question or comment that it's beyond the mind.
It's beyond
So
the mind.
the mind
The mind
cannot.
cannot know. When you hear a teacher talk about it, it appears that the teacher is a body mind that knows these things, but that is an illusion. That is not the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Very few people ask me this question. It's a great question. So the other side of this is that just by exploring your experience, you cannot know this. Many people say, well, all you have to do is explore your experience, but just by exploring your experience, you cannot know that consciousness is eternal. Because you don't know. The only way is to go within and to merge, to sink into yourself and dissolve yourself, meaning dissolve duality, dissolve body, mind, world into the pure consciousness, so that all is left is pure consciousness. And that's when the knowledge dawns. I am that. I am that. That's why the Upanishads say only through nirvikalpa samadhi can the knowledge I am that dawn. It's because only when you go inwards and all the vikalpas, all the thoughts cease. That's nirvikalpa. And only in the nirvikalpa state, nirvikalpa sthiti, nirvikalpa samadhi, only in this state, when there are no thought waves, no objects, is the self realized as I am that. Tattvamasi. This is why the need to go inwards, because otherwise, if you're sensing the sense of self, sense of I am, but the objects are there, you're never sure. Is the consciousness dependent on the body? Or is the body dependent on the consciousness? How to know? You cannot know. You might have an inkling, you might have an intuition, but you don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's the limitations of the mind.
Would you so we'll leave it there if that's okay, Hester, because it sounds like that's resolved for you. Before we leave, can I just ask you to read the teaching verse one more time, because it's such a lovely verse or
That one little
sentence.
sentence.
That sentence, please, yes, because it's a lovely sentence.
When, after a long period of effort and struggles to do sadhana, one gives up doing sadhana, then and only then does real sadhana, self-attention, begin.
Thank you. And just for everybody's benefit, this teaching is also given in Guru Vachika Kovai, Garland of Guru Sayings. You'll see the same teaching. Do not ask me which verse, because I do not know. You have to scurry through the 1,000 verses yourself and try and find it, or maybe someone knows. But I'm fairly sure, I'm fairly certain I've seen this teaching in Guru Vachika Kovai as well. So not only is Sri Sadhu Om saying it in the paramount importance of self-attention, as Hester has read to us, but it is also a teaching given directly by Bhagavan Ramana All the teachings that Sri Sadhuam gives are also given by Bhagavan Ramana. Pretty much. I've not found one that Sri Sadhuam has given that Bhagavan Ramana hasn't also given. And this is no exception. Thank you, Hester. Wonderful, wonderful teaching, wonderful questions. And I hope the answers were somewhat wonderful too, perhaps. Hope they were up to the quality of the question.
Definitely, very, very clear and powerful. Thank you.
Thank you.